So excited about tonight's show. I'd heard so much about X-Men 97, and um, I'm the type of person that I've gotten spoiled over the years, right? We have now turned into a society. I'm a byproduct of this, and I am literally the picture of impatience in terms of watching and viewing a product. Once upon a time, we all sat, we watched, and we waited until the next week, until the next time the show came on, and you had to wait in suspense. Um, Gone are those days now. With the advent of being able to binge and watch everything all at once, I have become very grown and immune to the fact that I don't want to wait. And so I'm immune to waiting at this point. So for many of you, you went through this process week by week, left on a cliffhanger. And for me, I was more of the mindset of I'm going to wait till this thing is done. So I don't have to, go through the agony of wondering what's going to happen next. I can just go to the next episode. At the end of the day, we all arrived at the same point. And man, was this well worth the wait. You could argue this is the single greatest piece of content Marvel has ever delivered to us. And I want to talk about it. Bonus pod episode, nothing but X-Men 97. Y'all know what it is. Let's get to work. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T, here with this bonus podcast episode featuring our discussion about X-Men 97. There are 10 episodes. I'm going to try to go through each episode and kind of recall a lot of what transpired. You guys can help me fill in the gaps because there's a lot to digest. I may forget a thing or two, and then we can discuss that as well. I was blown away by this whole production, this whole setup, the intricate details that were paid attention to. For a junkie, an X-Men junkie like myself growing up. And I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory first. Let me give you a little bit of backstory. So I wasn't a big Marvel fan. I wasn't a big comic book fan growing up initially. I had a friend named Mike that I met in elementary school. And I would go over to Mike's house all the time, every chance I get. And we would just kick it, play in his room. He had this chest, and he had a TV in his room, and he had a chest. And this chest had a bunch of toys and a bunch of comic cards in it, right? Now, he didn't take care of his cards. He was a little kid. He didn't, take care of his cards or whatever. But it was there in that chest that I discovered what ultimately became my love for comics. We would sit and play with his action figures. Then we would look at the cards. I'd read every single one of those cards, the back of it meticulously, because it give you facts about said character on the front. And all of a sudden, this show X-Men is on television, and it coincides with a lot of these cards, and we are mesmerized by it. And I just remember falling in love with the theme song. And I remember my friend Mike being so pissed off after season 3 when they changed the intro, because it used to, and that's like one of the things, I think this 97 was so nostalgic for me because it tied in so many different things, including the intro, right? The intro and the exit. So the intro to 97 the first 3 seasons of the original X-Men show from 92 to 97, or 96 rather, featured the intro you saw with Cyclops going like this and the beam shooting in the air, and then, Gambit, having the cards, and, Rogue flying through the air, and Storm, in the air, with the storm and all that stuff. So you got to see each character. It's almost like how you watch a sitcom, or you watch some sort of show on cable television, and everybody gets their individual name and credit. They show you them and their name, and maybe they stop and they pause and they smile or something like that. That was sort of the way they did it with the X-Men, and it was dope, and we loved it. And then season 4 came around and they changed it. They went away from that and just had like a bunch of different scenes of them fighting and all of this stuff. And my friend Mike was so pissed off about it. At that time, it didn't move me. Like, I was like, it's whatever, dude. I just care about the next 20 minutes of content that we're getting. But as I got older, I grew very fond of that intro, and them bringing it back. I hope they don't change it in season 2, because that was one of the things. And then I even enjoyed the next step of them evolving by taking out characters that were no longer a part of the storyline, even if temporarily. Like Storm, for instance, when she loses her powers, they took her out of the intro, right? Initially, Professor X was in the intro, episode 1. Episode 2, he's out, Magneto is in, right? And then as it progresses, Magneto's out, obviously Gambit's out. We'll talk about all of that stuff. And then Professor X is reintroduced back into the intro when he comes back in episode 9. And so I even love that part of it. And then the exit, right? The end of the show, season 1, this was only for season 1. After the show would go off, it would click on it. It had all of the members of the X-Men, and it would click on one of them, and they would be spinning around in this circle, and it would tell you what their powers were, right? And they would click on each one of the characters. And I thought that was dope. And that was something that I enjoyed as a kid. And to see them bring that back, and they got rid of that very quickly. Like I said, that was only season 1. After that, they got rid of the whole, spinning avatar with them and telling us what their powers are. And again, after you see that once or twice, you don't need to see it again. So I understood why they got rid of it. I just enjoyed it, right? Anyway, those little things were nostalgic for me. Again, I'm told you I was going to geek out tonight. So if you watched the original show, it was a lot of fun. And the thing about it is, and this is why I'm going to need your help tonight, because a lot of the X-Men, a lot of this, the content from X-Men 97 is so condensed. Like, they could have probably made this into 20 episodes, 15, 17, 18 episodes, right? A lot of it is condensed, and they did it in a 30-minute format, essentially. So they crammed a lot into one episode, into 2, into 3, into 10, ultimately 10 episodes. They could have spread this thing out, and it would have been just as good. But for the sake of time, people have short attention spans, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot to expand these episodes out or to make more of them. They just did 10. And so it's easy to forget. And I haven't watched it but once. I haven't gone through it and watched it 15 times like I ultimately will, right? I've only watched it once. So you guys can fill in some of the blanks. So here's the backstory on X-Men 97 for those of you who are unaware. The original show ran from 92 to 96, which is why this is called 97. So essentially, they are picking up where the show left off, if that makes any sense. Okay, so this would have been what would have aired in 97, is essentially what they're saying, right? So it's a pretty clever way of going about it. A lot of the plot for X-Men 97 comes from season 1 of the original show, and they fill in some of the gaps, from seasons 2 through 5. But for the most part, you can get all that you pretty much need in about 5 or 6 episodes of season 1, the final 5 or 6 episodes of season 1, and then the very final episode of season 5, the final episode of the original X-Men series, which is called Graduation Day, is essentially where they pick up from. So I'll just give you a quick backstory to kind of get us to present day. In the original show, Cable comes from the future. He comes back to the past from the future to try to find this Godfrey Adler, right? This is the guy that he's coming after because Adler was supposedly the guy that created the little neck columns and braces that would stop mutants from being able to use their powers. This set off a chain of events that led to the demise of mutants into the future, et cetera, et cetera. So he's looking for this guy. He's been brought back. He's been brought from the future back to the past to look for him. So in that whole process, he encounters a bunch of different people. And, you know, we start learning about some of these backstory characters. Henry Peter Gyrick, we start to learn about him. You start to learn about Sinister and some of these other guys. And they don't know, you know, the beauty of it is Cable was a relatively new character. Bishop was a relatively new character when the show started. So unless you read the comics, you really didn't know who those guys were. And the X-Men didn't know who they were, right? So Cyclops didn't know that at that time that was his son. Jean Grey didn't know that, you know, that was her son, you know. So there were, you know, a lot of different things. They didn't know who Bishop was, and he would come along about an episode or two later after Cable showed up, and he obviously came from the future back to the past to try to change history. Forge sent Bishop back. Initially, Wolverine was going to come back, but Wolverine was old and he wasn't as nimble as he once was. So Bishop was like, you couldn't even defeat, you know, these Prime Sentinels, and you couldn't even defeat Nimrod. Like, I can't send you back to the past. They'll crush you. I'm going. So Forge agrees with Bishop. They send Bishop back to the past to stop the assassination of the president. He, at the time, supposed to be the president. Bishop forgets what is supposed to happen, what he's sent back to the past to do, because in his transmission from the future back to the past, there was a disruption because a Sentinel had come and gotten into the facility. And so he wasn't completely aware of what his mission was. So he's trying to put the pieces back together, figuring out where he was, this, that, and the third. He runs into a newspaper. He figures out where, you know, what's the timing. And so he sees Professor X. So now he's like, okay, I need to find the X-Men. His memory starts to jog a bit. And then, you know, he gets around the X-Men. They don't believe him. They don't know where he's from. They think he's some crazy man making up a bunch of stuff. So they take him back to the mansion. Professor X jumps into his head, but it's kind of all foggy. But they see enough to start to believe him a little bit. They still aren't sure, though. They're a little skeptical. And then Rogue and Gambit show up to the mansion, and Bishop snaps like, I'm here to kill you. You're the traitor. You're the guy that's going to assassinate whomever I'm supposed to stop. The assassination attempt, you're the guy that does the assassinating. So they don't believe him. Gambit, you know, says, are y'all going to believe him or are you going to believe me? This dude is crazy. They're like, you know, Beast is like, everybody calm down. He could be telling the truth. We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. And Gambit's like, oh, y'all don't trust me. You know, Gambit already has trust issues already, as we all know. So he's like, oh, y'all don't trust me. So he storms out. So they go and track him down, and they're like, bro, you can't leave. We don't know what's going on. But Professor X is like, well, I'm supposed to have a conference, you know, at the in Washington, D.C. And that's where Bishop is like, that's where the assassination is going to take place. So anyway, long story short, Bishop, Wolverine, and Gambit are all playing cards. They're supposed to be held up while the whole Washington, D.C. thing takes place to make sure that Gambit doesn't, he's not the assassin, essentially. Well, Gambit decides, I'm going there to clear my name because I know I ain't do shit and I'm no damn assassin. So he escapes the clutches of Wolverine and Bishop, takes the jet, and so they got to go after him. What ultimately happens is Mystique is, shape-shifting and acting as she kidnapped one of the assistants and ultimately acted like she was Gambit, turned into Gambit to make it look like it was him doing the assassination. So in all of this taking place, Gambit goes there, kind of foils the plan. Rogue finds out that Mystique is her mom at that point. So you see the storyline developing a little bit. So she takes Mystique out of there. But in the process of all of that taking place, Magneto sneaks in and takes the senator, Kelly, who ultimately becomes the president in 97. Back then, he was the senator at the time. And he takes him away, and Magneto's like, I'm going to kill you, bro, because you are going to try to destroy my kind, and I can't have that. So I'm going to kill you, pretty much. And the X-Men come in, they thwart, or actually the Sentinels come in and stop Magneto. They snatch the senator away, take him back to Bolivar Trask, where Bolivar Trask is then he's then turned on by the Master Mold, which is the thing that creates the Sentinels. And that's kind of where we go from there. And then ultimately you get to the very end where Professor X is at the UN summit, or he's in DC, and he's talking to the UN in the different powers that be. And Henry Peter Gyrick comes in, zaps him with, this device, and Professor X is down for the count. They think he's about to die. The only way to save him is to get Lilandra to come and take him to her, back to Shira with her. And she has the ability to kind of heal him there. They don't have the necessary tools to heal him. But the only problem is his mind isn't powerful enough to summon Lilandra to come get him. So they need Magneto to help them. Magneto strengthens Professor X's mind. Lilandra takes Professor X back to Shira with her, and that's pretty much the end, right? So that's where we end up in present day. So you're pretty much all caught up, a couple of pieces here and there, but for the most part, that's where we were left off at in 96. So 97 kind of picks up there. So, all right. So episode 1, let's just jump into it and talk about it. Episode 1, To Me, My X-Men. We'll go through all these episodes, and I'll just kind of give you the skinny on my thought process as I'm watching this thing. So, episode 1, and in that final graduation day episode, they Morph acts as Professor Xavier. So he speaks to the public, makes them think he's still alive, but it was actually Morph. So Magneto thought he was dead. Magneto's ready to go crazy, and then they get to Magneto and tell him he's not dead, but we need your help. And that's how Lilandra comes and takes him. So in 97, the episode starts with the X-Men kind of we see Roberto da Silva being kidnapped. Da Costa, being kidnapped, essentially, who we later find out is Sunspot. So he's like look, I'm one of the good ones. I don't even want to be a mutant, yada, yada. They tell him, shut up. And so the X-Men come to save him. And what they encounter is that the FOH, which is Friends of Humanity, which is this group that really is at the core. So some of the things that are always at the core of issues, FOH, which are Friends of Humanity, Sentinels, and then you have obviously the usual suspects, the characters that are always going to be involved: Magneto, Professor X, Jean Grey, Cyclops, Wolverine. They're usually going to be at the crux of this. Mr. Sinister going to be a big part of this. So these are the names that you have to become accustomed to, because they're the ones that are going to keep coming up over and over and over again. So the Friends of Humanity have these upgraded weapons all of a sudden now. And Cyclops and all of them are kind of taken aback by, the upgrade and weaponry. Like, wait a minute, when did y'all have Sentinels that do this, right? And they got these weapons that they shoot from their wrist and all of this stuff. They're like, wait a minute, where'd y'all get this high tech shit? So obviously they ultimately defeat, the FHO, but it took a little while. And initially they thought they'd be able to do it with a few of them, but they needed more help. And so they escape, they get away, but it leaves them asking questions like, yo, what the hell is going on? Where did they get all that technology and shit from? So now everyone thinks Professor Charles Xavier is dead at this point. So do the X-Men, right? They were there when Lilandra came and got him. They know that he went to Shira, but they don't know that he's still alive. They don't know if he made it or not, because they didn't think he would stay there. Like, if he was alive, he would have come back, because he's Professor X. He wouldn't have abandoned us. But he didn't come back. So they think he's dead. The whole world thinks he's dead. And Peter Henry Myrick, or Gyrick, excuse me, is the culprit. So he is in jail for committing the murder of Charles Xavier. And he essentially goes to prison, and they go to meet with him in prison to talk to him, because they want to get to the bottom of all of this new technology. Where could they find Bolivar Trask and all of that good stuff? And he's not going to give them any information. So that, the gist of it is Cyclops is dealing with this newfound leadership role because there's no Professor X. They're trying to figure out how they can get to the bottom of this new source of technology that, FOH has, and where did it come from? And it could only be one person that's doing this, Bolivar Trask. We need to find him. Then you have the dynamic of Cyclops and Jean Grey. Jean Grey is pregnant, and so they're talking about life maybe outside of the X-Men. Well, at least Jean Grey is. Cyclops is like, bro, you really trying to leave? And she's like, yeah, I want to raise our son. And he's like, but I don't really know if I can lead the X-Men, though, especially now that Professor X is not here. I'm really the leader. I can't see myself leaving, but it was something that they were mulling over. So that was essentially episode 1 in a nutshell. Episode 2, Mutant Liberation begins. So this one is crazy because Magneto shows up at the end of episode 1, and he tells the X-Men, hey, Charles Xavier left me as the leader of you guys in his will. He throws the will to Cyclops. And so he's like, what, Professor X didn't trust me? Right? So he's starting to doubt himself. Am I not a good enough leader? All of that stuff. And Magneto kind of comes in and he's like, I'm going to do what Charles would do, right? I'm not going to come in here and do the Magneto thing that you think I'm going to do, which is come in here and try to, impose my will against the humans and protect mutants, because we know that there will never be this harmonious situation between humans and mutants. And so if somebody's going to win this thing, it's going to be us. It ain't going to be them. And that's been Magneto's stance all along, is look, it's never going to be what Professor X sees this thing as being. Professor X's thing is, well, we can't stop trying to fight to save humanity and be as one. And Magneto is like, it's never going to be that way. And it's either us or them, and I'm not going to let it be us. So everybody thought Magneto was going to come in with that mindset, but he's like, no, I'm going to try to do it Professor X's way. This is what he would have wanted. I'm going to honor my guy by trying to do it his way first. So Magneto's playing by the rules. He's behaving himself. He even is forced to stand trial in front of the UN. He puts on the little device to stop him from being able to use his powers. He's in shackles. He's not going to do anything crazy, right? And the FOH gets wind of this, trial, if you will, and they decide that they're going to bust it up. So in the process of that, I think Magneto was accompanied at the trial by like Beast and Rogue and Gambit. The only two that were left behind, and Jubilee. I think the only two that were left behind at the mansion was Wolverine and Jean Grey, because ultimately Jean Grey, her water broke and she needed to go to the hospital, and Wolverine had to be the one to take her. So and Storm was at the trial. This is important because this was the episode where she loses her powers. So ultimately the FOH breaches the security. They're coming in. They want the judges. But they really were there for Magneto. But the judges get scared. They're ushered out. Storm is tasked with protecting Magneto, and Cyclops is like, the rest of us are gonna go and kind of stop the FHO. Well, they got this one dude who's dressed in this, metal attire, and he's a badass, and he's whooping their ass. I mean, he is kicking the shit out of Cyclops. I mean, he beats the brakes off of Cyclops. And ultimately, they're able to get the situation under control in terms of limiting the damage that's being done. But ultimately, what happens is they get inside, and they get a shot at Magneto. And this is obviously what we find out later is going to, rid him of all of his powers. So this is the kind of device that they now have in their possession. And Storm sees it about to happen. She dives in the way, takes the shot, and there goes Storm's powers. So at this point, Magneto's like, see, I told y'all, right? Tried to be civilized. This is the shit that we get when we try to do it the right way. Jean Grey ends up having her baby. In the midst of this ass whooping, she's able to get into Cyclops' mind and let him know, bro, this baby is coming right now. You might want to get here. So Storm, so I think it was Storm who told Rogue, hey, take Cyclops to the hospital. I got Magneto and everybody else handle the rest of this stuff. You go and take him to the hospital. So he goes there. There's an issue with, the delivery. They don't want to deliver the baby, XYZ, but it ultimately happens. So Nathan is born, and everything kind of works out. They're back at the mansion. There's a knock at the door, and Jean Grey collapses in Morph's arms, who answers the door. And everybody's like, if that's Jean, who the hell is this? And that's where they leave us at episode 2. So you get to episode 3. Fire made flesh. So the real Jean Grey, what we ultimately find out, Beast does some DNA testing, cross-references some things, and he's able to determine that the Jean Grey that collapsed at the door in Morph's arms is the real Jean Grey. So you are some sort of clone. So everybody's like, well, who the hell is she? So that's part of the storyline in episode 3. Storm ends up leaving the X-Men because she doesn't have her powers anymore. You know, the irony of her losing her powers, earlier in episode 2, she was having a conversation with Jean Grey, who was kind of trying to figure out what should she do. She was getting nervous about being a mom, this, that, and the third. And Storm has always been like her confidant. She's always been like a sister to her. And so Storm is telling her, look, you know, you're being a mom, you're not tripping, it's okay. We all have thought about wanting to be normal at some point, and we all wonder what it would be like. And Storm kind of hinted at the fact that she would like to be normal, right? And then she ultimately got her wish, and clearly it was not what she wanted, right? So then once they found out that the other Jean Grey was a clone of some sort, which we would later learn her name was Madeline Pryor, we get into her backstory and where her origins were, and then we get into the whole Mr. Sinister plot. That was our first time being introduced to Sinister in '97, and he's controlling Madeline Pryor, and he created her because, so for those of you who are unaware, you got to go back to either you're a comic book reader or you got to go back to the series. So in the series, you learn that Mr. Sinister wants to create a race of super mutants. That is his ultimate goal. That is his life's purpose. So in his mind, so he was so going back to his origins, he was a regular human. He was intelligent. He was a scientist, but he was fascinated with mutants. So much so that he encountered Apocalypse, and Apocalypse turned him into a mutant, essentially. Gave him powers, the ability to, not age, etc., shapeshift, all of the things that we've known Mr. Sinister to be able to do, right? So Sinister, in his mind, feels like Jean Grey and Cyclops have the perfect DNA if you put it together to create this serum that will allow him to create the most powerful super mutant possible. Like their genes, their DNA is what will give him this super serum that will allow him to create the most ferocious, indestructible super mutant ever. So he ends up cloning Jean Grey because he ends up capturing both of them. The X-Men in the show, the X-Men free them, but this is why I love this series, because it took bits and pieces from the comic, it took bits and pieces from the show, it kind of fused and merged them together, and they did it beautifully, and it was seamless. So Sinister ends up taking over Madeline Pryor's mind. She's fighting Cyclops over the baby. She's tormenting them in the mansion, and ultimately she leaves with baby Nathan, brings baby Nathan to Sinister, because ultimately that's why he created her, so that that offspring could be the start of that super mutant that he wants to create. So Sinister creates this whole illusion in the mansion, and they're kind of fighting these demons. And this is the first time you're exposed to him in '97, right? So that was the gist of the episode. So they rescue the baby, but not until he's already been exposed to this liquid that Sinister has put together to get him to be what he thinks is going to be this superhuman, that super mutant that he wants to create. But they got to him, but not in time enough to stop some of the effects from happening. So in order to try to either reverse the effects or to help him better assimilate, Bishop takes baby Nathan into the future. Cyclops wanted to go, Jean Grey wanted to go, but Bishop was like, yo, the reactor on the wrist reactor that he has to travel through time, it's only strong enough because Beast had fixed it, but it was only strong enough to take essentially one person. So he was like, I can take the baby, but y'all can't go. So Bishop takes the baby. They go through the portal. That's the last we hear of Nathan. Nathan, which turns into Cable, until about episode 5 is when we see Cable show up for the first time, which is pretty heavy stuff. Episode 5 is. We'll get to that in a second. So, anyway, at the end of that episode, Storm encounters Forge, who rolls up on her at a bar and is like, hey, I can help you get your powers back. And that's how episode 3 ends. You get to episode 4, and part of the part of the love of the original series was that it would give you part 1, part 2, and it would jump around, but it was all connected. So you could watch random episodes, but stuff could happen in those episodes, and if you didn't watch prior episodes, then you would be kind of lost, right? So while you don't have to watch every episode prior to understand what's going on in this particular episode, if you want to know everything that's going on or have a working knowledge of some things that might happen in the course of an episode, because as you saw in 97, there are 2, 3, 4 different storylines happening at once. And so you might understand this because you're watching this episode, but these other 2 storylines, if you didn't watch the previous 6 episodes, then you can't know what the hell they're talking about on these other 2 storylines. So I like how they did it here. And they jump around, right? So this episode 4 was kind of random as hell. But if you were a junkie like me from the 92 to 96, then you're exposed to Mojo, right? Mojo is hilarious. We used to get a kick out of him back in the day because I think Mojo is even more so relevant now than he was back in the day, which is crazy how the Mojo character has evolved, because Mojo is this spineless creature that exists in what they call Mojo verse. So this Mojo verse is essentially like this big television, program. It's almost like you're watching a movie through the eyes of Mojo, and you're in this like kind of, this video game of sorts, kind of like this episode, but he controls everything that the Mojo verse watches. And it's like he does everything for ratings, for the approval of the audience. And so he's nuts, right? But it's all in the name of like a good show and the approval of those watching. So he creates this Motendo, right? So this episode 4 is called Motendo / Life Death Part 1. And so in this, it's Jubilee's birthday. She's turning 18. And, again, a backstory with Jubilee is she's the youngest member of the X-Men. So they treat her like she's a kid, and she gets upset. They don't let her go on missions. Hey, kid, stay out of this. Wolverine's always protecting her. And she gets upset because she's like, no, I'm one of you guys. I'm a part of the family. Let me fight too. And they always try to keep her out of stuff. Like there's one episode where her and Rogue are sitting at a tree. She falls asleep and Rogue just leaves her there. Like, all right, bro, I'm going to take care of this. You stay here. You stay out of harm's way or whatever. This was during the 92, 96 episodes. But anyway, so it's her 18th birthday and she wants to celebrate. And some of them want to celebrate her, but Magneto's like, bro, are we talking about going out and playing video games and celebrating? Like, do you understand? We are at war. We don't have no time for this. Grow up, right? And she's like, yo, it's my birthday. What are you talking about, grow up? Like, I'm about to turn up. So she goes back to her room, and her and Roberto are kicking it, and she's talking about playing video games, and she turns around, and there's a video game right there. And she's like, oh, they told me they had a surprise for me. So she's thinking that they bought that video game, not knowing that Mojo put that there. And she gets sucked into this virtual reality game essentially that Mojo's controlling for the interest of those watching in Mojoverse. So that's a part of that storyline. You also have as a part of that episode, Forge and Storm starting to have a bond that is growing. Forge he's infatuated with Storm, and Storm's kind of like, why are you so enamored with me? Like, why do you want to help me so much? And he tells her, I can get you your powers back. So she's all ears, but she's also like curious as to, why do you want to help me so much? I don't really understand. Like, you just told me you were a friend of Charles Xavier. That's cool, but like, what's going on now? Right. So you start to get that. And then by the end of the episode, she realizes that, because she kept wondering, why are you so insistent on helping me? And Forge finally breaks down and is like, all right, look, don't flip out on me. Don't be mad. And look, if you want to leave after this, you can. But I want to be honest with you. I sort of kind of created that module that zapped you of your powers. So Forge's backstory is, he used to work for the government a long time ago. He was working on a device that would help, the little collar device. He kind of helped create that, right? Again, initially it was created with the mindset of, it wasn't going to harm the mutants XYZ. It wasn't going to be used in a reckless manner, but it got into the wrong hands, like these things always do. And so he was working on creating something, and before it was finished, they took it from him, and he's like, it hasn't been tested yet. And that ultimately was the device that zapped Storm. It turned into that device that zapped Storm of her powers. So he felt responsible, which is why he wanted to help her get her powers back so much. Once he told her that, she was incensed and she wanted to leave. Upon leaving, there was this demon that was kind of in the house, in the cabin. That's kind of where they were staying, in Forge's cabin. And it was a demon in there, and it was getting into Storm's head, but it bit Forge. So he was starting to have this poison that if it got to his heart, he would die, etc. So that was a part of that storyline. So Jubilee ultimately, along with Roberto, who actually dies in the game, but it's a video game, so Jubilee's future self, who was already in the game, was giving them things to help them survive. And it actually helped bring Roberto back to life. And they defeat Mojo, and they defeat all of the characters, and ultimately get out of the game. And Jubilee was having fun. And her future self was like, I'm going to just tell you, I know it might seem like a lot of fun, but you don't want to be here. You want to live life. You don't want to be doing the same levels over and over and over again. Trust me. Let me stay here and keep doing this. You go live your life. So ultimately, they get out of the game, and it was a close call, right? So that was episode 4. Episode 5, Remember It, is one of the most heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, yet irresistibly, excellently executed pieces of art I have seen in any space in a comic space ever. Period. This one was a crazy episode. So this one left me feeling empty. And if not for the fact that I could just go to episode 6, I don't know what I would have done. Because I literally, when this episode ended, I was just sitting there, like staring into like blank space. So episode 5, Remember It, is essentially starts off with Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit going to Genosha, which is essentially a refuge. It's an island full of mutants. It's a place of refuge that they've created. And they're going there to meet Madeline Pryor, who has now been anointed as a part of the hierarchy of Genosha. And Nightcrawler is there, and some of the members of the UN are there. This is an event that is taking place to show unity between the UN and mutants. So this is supposed to be a joyous occasion, supposed to show the unity and the progress that's being made between mutants and humans. And while this is taking place, Cyclops is given a one-on-one interview with the media, with the press. So that didn't go as well as they had planned. All the while that's taking place, Wolverine is talking to Jean Grey. She's having one of those vulnerable moments where she's like kind of confused as to what to do. The whole Madeline Pryor situation, Nathan, all of that good stuff. So she's kind of going through the motions, and she hauls off and kisses Wolverine. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute, bro. Like, I do got a thing for you, but even though Cyclops get on my damn nerves, that's still my man's in them. I can't be doing that behind his back. You had a temporary moment of weakness. You lost your mind. You were insane for a second. Temporary moment of insanity. We just gonna act like that shit didn't happen, and we gonna move forward. All the while, the gang is over in Genosha, and Rogue is having her little complex situation going down because she loves Gambit, but she can't touch him. She had a fling with Magneto before. A lot of people didn't know that, but she had a fling with Magneto before because Magneto is immune to her power, right? She can touch Magneto. It doesn't affect him because of his magnetism. He's fine. So that allows her to feel human when she's with Magneto. But she really, truly cares for Gambit. So she's kind of torn between the two, right? So she's got to figure out what she wants to do. But all the while, she's having a great time. But Magdalene Pryor is like in her mind, like, something's up. She can feel it. She doesn't know what's going on, but she knows something is off. She keeps kind of like, something's wrong. So all of this is going on. They're kind of, living it up, having a great time in Genosha. And then Magdalene encounters her son for the first time as an adult in Cable. And he comes to her and he's telling her, turn the music off. They're coming. Prepare yourselves. Get everybody out of there. And she's like, what are you talking about? And her whole thing, he's trying to warn her about the impending doom that's forthcoming. And she's so fixated on the fact that, oh my God, this is my son. So she's not really hearing the message. She's more concerned with the fact that, oh my God, I am touching my son. Look what you've turned into. I'm so happy to be talking to you. You've got your father's eyes. Oh my God. And she's so mesmerized by all of that, that she's not heeding the message. His transistor sends him back to the future. And as he's going back, he tells his mom, I'm so sorry. And she's like, sorry for what? And then the shit hits the fan. And this is the first time that we encounter the Prime Sentinels, which are the most evolved form of Sentinels. We started with these basic low-level Sentinels that Wolverine would just claw them, knock their head off, keep it pushing. Cyclops would hit them with a little beam and they were done. They were chopping these dudes in half like nothing. Now these evolved Prime Sentinels who are able to limit the power of mutants around them. Their beams are more hyper, they're more advanced. Their metal is a lot tougher now, and so they're, they move faster, they're smarter, all of that stuff. They've been improved to a level that you're not just gonna hit them with one little beam or claw them one time and that's it. And so they come in full bore and they just destroy Genosha, and I mean ravage the entire island. And in the process, they kill Magdalene Pryor. They got it at that time. It felt like Magneto was dead, but we know he's one of the characters. He's not dying, but it felt like they had gotten Magneto, and Rogue was getting her ass whooped, but she was dishing out some damage too. But it was taking a toll on her as well because she was outnumbered, and ultimately one of them stuck Gambit essentially in his midsection, just went straight through his frame with one of them and lifted him up into his face and is like something like mutant apprehended. I forget the exact phrase that the Sentinel said. Neutralized, I think is what he said. Mutant neutralized, I think is what he said. And Gambit knows he's about to die, but he takes every ounce of energy that he has in his body and he lights up this Sentinel. He said, "The name's Gambit, mon ami." And he gives him everything he's got because he knows he's gonna die. But I'm gonna take this whole shit out with me. And he says, "Remember it." And he blows everything up. And I'm just sitting there like, did what I think just happen? Like, because you used to them getting into these scraps. They end up on, back at the mansion, laying down on the bed for 3 days as Beast takes care of them. Like, okay, he's going to be fine. But once he did that, and then I put 2 and 2 together with the name of the episode, I went, did what I think just happened just happen? And then they cut to the end of the episode. And I'm just sitting there like in disbelief, just with this empty stare, like, nah, man, they didn't. Nah, they didn't kill Gambit, right? So my wife is notorious for when something happens like that that's jarring, she likes to go look at the rest of the episodes to see if the, little tidbit that they give you, like, the descriptive nature of the episode gives her a tell as to whether what she just saw is true or not. And I hate when she does that. Just watch, right? I pulled one of my wife's maneuvers after that. Like, did he really? No, don't tell me he's gone, bro. Like, I can't, like, that my mind can't compute that right now. Like, don't say that to me. So I went looking, episode 7, 6, 7, 8, nothing. It doesn't say anything about anything. So I'm like, nah, man. Gambit ain't gone. Yeah, Gambit gone. Gambit gone. That was a tough one. So the reason why this has meaning, for me at least, was it put me on notice that, hey, anybody could get it at this point. If they just took Gambit from us, now you can't assume that, hey, he'll be okay. Nobody's going to die here. No, they just took Gambit. So that means anybody's fair game. Anybody could get this work. So now I'm on high alert at this point. That's going to come in handy for episode 9. That's going to come in handy for episode 9. So we go to episode 6. And it's called Life Death Part 2. So again, remember I talked about how they'll go through episodes. So Life Death Part 1 was in episode 4. They skipped over that storyline and came back to it for Part 2 in episode 6. So that, again, I just thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, one is, us finding out. So they kind of leave us on a cliffhanger with Gambit, even though everything points to him being dead. They never actually say anything about it. We don't really formally get closure until episode 7. So while we can insinuate he's dead, we're not actually told he's dead, right? So Magneto, so Professor X is in Shira with Lilandra, and they're about to be married. So this is when we find out Professor X really isn't dead. And at this point, if you followed X-Men for any amount of time, how many times has Professor X been dead and then not been dead? At this point, I'm like, man, you ain't dead. You ain't dead. Get out of here, man. Where you at? Stop playing with me. He's been dead 57 times. He's never dead, okay? So, which gives me hope for Gambit, but he's not Professor X. So, he's alive and well in Shira with Lilandra, and Lilandra is trying to convince her populace that Professor X is worthy of essentially being their king, because if he marries her, because she's pretty much their queen of sorts, if she marries him, he's a part of the throne now, and he's trustworthy. He's not going to try to push off the human race, or their kind of mutants onto them, and this, that, and the third. They're worried about him not being natural, not being one of them. So that whole saga is unfolding. She has to try to prove to them that he's good people's. You don't have to worry about him. She's got a batshit crazy sister named Deathlord, that's Lilandra, and she's like, nah, bro, I'm not letting this shit go down. We can't trust him. Y'all, look, I'm telling y'all, and there's this panel that exists there, like almost like a high table of sorts, and she kind of appealed to them like, wait, we can't trust him. All right, if you want us to trust you, then you got to denounce the X-Men, and you can't have any contact with them. You got to erase your memory of anything to do with them. That'll prove how loyal you are to us. And X was prepared to do it. Like, he mentally went through a couple of hurdles that he had to overcome, but he was like, ultimately, you saved my life, Lilandra. Like, I'm forever in debt to you, and this is the way I'm gonna show my gratitude, by stepping up to the plate and showing you how much I appreciate you, love you, and appreciate what you did for me. He gets to the edge, to the brink of doing it, and he's like, bro, my X-Men are over here struggling. He starts to get wind of all of the shit that's going on with Genosha and all the things that are going on back at home, and Gambit and everything. And he realized they need me. I can't do this. I can't be here. I got to go. So that's how that situation went. Meanwhile, Storm confronts the demon that bit Forge, and that demon is chirping in her ear. Her and Forge she's taking care of Forge. The venom that he was injected with when he was bitten by the demon is starting to spread. If it gets to his heart, he dies. So she's like, he tells her that there's this one, antidote, this one cactus that you have to get, but it grows underground. It's in the dark. And if you watched the regular series, the first series, you learn that Storm is terribly afraid of confined spaces. They don't really go into specifics as to why, but she just doesn't like confined spaces. So, and that was a theme of the original show. Like they would talk about it all the time. So she's like, I'll go get this cactus for you and bring it back. He's like, nah, bro, I gotta be there with you because I know you're afraid of confined spaces, and where it's at, it's pretty tight in there. And if I am going to die, I don't want to die alone. I'd rather die with you by my side, essentially. So she took him with her to go get, and he showed her the way. They end up at this cave. They go in there, and they find the cactus, but it's like up this tunnel, and it's really dark and it's really tight, and this demon is in her ear trying to get her to let Forge die, and he's like, I'll restore your powers and do this and do that. And so she's got to fight this mental demon, obviously, and she's able to ultimately stave off the demon, which ultimately helps her get her powers back, because Forge had already put her in this machine, and it didn't work initially, or so she thought. But it really was more of Forge doing what he did, and then her getting rid of that mental block that she had. And so all of that was kind of like a part of that episode, a part of her getting her powers back. She gets the cactus, she gets the cream that out of the cactus, puts it on Forge, saves his life, gets her powers back, and that's essentially how that episode goes. So you're left to assume that Professor X is on his way back to the X-Men as well in episode 6. So you then get to episode 7, and it's called Bright Eyes. And this is the first time we really see the confirmation that, Gambit is dead. The episode starts with the funeral and Nightcrawler giving a very touching eulogy of Gambit, and very noticeably, someone's absent, and that someone is Rogue, because she's losing her shit. She was healing up from Genosha, and once she figured out Gambit was dead, she lost her shit. You know, that was her guy, right? So now she wants blood. She's out for blood. So she goes and she's looking for Bolivar Trask. And anybody that gets in her way at this point could end up being a casualty. So during this journey that she's taking to try to find Bolivar Trask, she encounters Captain America. We also are exposed to OZT for the first time. If you watched the first installment of X-Men, that was also something that you saw throughout that as well. But we weren't exposed to Bastion, because he hadn't been created yet. So but we are exposed to OZT, which is Operation Zero Tolerance, which, you know, what we would ultimately find out that means. So she doesn't know that. We don't know that. We just see a bunch of OZT stuff when she encounters Captain America. So she leaves there, and she ends up running into Henry Peter Gyrick. And she, you know, Rogue means business when she takes the glove off. So she took the glove off on his ass and zapped him. And ultimately, her quest kind of shakes things up, and it leads to Bolivar Trask reaching out to the X-Men. He's shook at this point, because none of the things that he envisioned are going the way that he thought when he started to create all of this stuff. You know, he felt like he was doing the human race a solid. He didn't realize he was creating all of this technology that was going to be used against humans in an effort to create these super mutants, essentially. So he didn't like the way that this shit was going. And so he wants to enlist the help of the X-Men, tell him everything that he knows, and then that's that. So in the episode, it's really sad because the X-Men go to Genosha and they're kind of walking around the island and just seeing the carnage. They're seeing those who have passed away. I forget the little reptile's name, but he was in the series. He was a part of the what was the name of that little crew that was living down in the sewer? Oh man, I can't remember their names. But it was this little crew that lived down in the sewer. It's the episode where we find out that Wolverine was like madly in love with Lady Deathstrike. Well, this was before she was Lady Deathstrike. And that was a whole alien episode. That one was crazy. But he was a part of that crew. But they were over in Genosha now. And they were dead, right? All of them was gone. And Beast was giving an interview to the lady that was doing the one-on-one with Cyclops. And Beast was giving her the business, like pretty much making her feel like shit. Like, this is what y'all did, right? You humans. And you stood outside, while my people were dying, you were over here on television talking about the shit. So you can really get the hell out my face and go F yourself, essentially. That's what he was telling her. And, they felt like they could do more, like we should have saved more lives. And then they ended up saving when there was one mutant trapped under a bunch of rebel. They were able to save her. But obviously it was a lot of work to be done on the island. And it made them realize, like one of the workers was like, I wanted to help so many people survive until I encountered those survivors and I realized death might be better than survival at this point for some of these people. It's that bad. So, it really painted this really tragic picture of what happened to Genosha, right? Anyway, so that was episode 7 in a nutshell. I don't think I forgot anything in episode 7. Oh, yes. Roberto tells his mom he's a mutant in episode 7. He tells his mom he's a mutant. Jubilee had been working on him all series long to that point about, hey, you need to tell your folks what you are. In case something happens to you, you don't want them to not know who you are when they find out you're a mutant at your funeral, yada, yada, yada. So she finally got him to break down and do it. And then he goes in, tells his mom, and she's like, I already knew that, bro. I've been knew that. Me and your father already knew. We just wanted you to tell us. So he's all excited and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe this whole time. I was so worried and you guys are so understanding. But Moms was like, but we got an empire to protect and we got investors. And so we got to keep this shit on the wraps. He's like, wait, what? You trying to keep me a secret? And she's like, not you, but you being a mutant. Yeah. So he wasn't a huge fan of that. And so he storms out. And essentially that was the gist of episode 7. Episode 8, Tolerance is Extinction. That is the name and the title of the last 3 episodes, just parts 1, 2, and 3. So part 1 was episode 8. I told you there were little bits and pieces that made me nostalgic. One of the things was in the first X-Men series, there's an episode where Magneto says, the brave are always the first to die. And he says it in the show. I thought that was pretty dope, right? Like the writers did a great job of kind of meshing everything and bringing some of the past to the present and making it all make sense and tying in storylines and, not paying homage to the past, but also creating new elements, right? So you get to episode 8, part 1 of Tolerance is Extinction, and Cable officially enters the fray, right? We'd seen him in episode 5 briefly, but now he's here to stay for the remainder of season 1. And he kind of is the one that explains who Bastion is, because in episode 7, we kind of get a glimpse of the fact that Mr. Sinister is not at the head of the table here. Like, all this time after episode 2, when we were really introduced to Sinister, we just thought he was the one controlling all of this shit. Little did we know he was like the assistant in all of this, but there was somebody else pulling all the strings, and that was Bastion. So the X-Men don't really know who Bastion is. So Cable kind of gives them a heads up because he's aware of Bastion from the future. So he kind of gives them the best description of Bastion that he can with the information that he has. As he's doing that, the X-Men look at the television and they learn that Professor X is not dead, and that in fact he was taking part in a ceremony to become married to Lilandra. So, you know, they're kind of all flummoxed at this point. Hey, we thought he was dead. He hasn't reached out to us this entire time. If he was alive, why didn't he come back to us? So they've got questions. They're kind of confused, but I mean, that's the extent of that. They got their own issues to worry about now. So at this point, we learned too that the UN was secretly working with Bolivar Trask and Mr. Sinister. Because one of the higher ups, that the lady with the glasses, I don't even know what her role was, but she was at Genosha when the shit hit the fan there, when the Prime Sentinels came in and you know, essentially rained down carnage on Genosha. She was there. She was, you know, always around. Anytime there was any important discussions happening between humans and mutants or the UN, she was a part of it. And so obviously she was a little banged up. She had her arm in a sling from Genosha, and she walks in, and at that time we didn't know she was a part of this. We knew that she was probably working with Bolivar Trask. We did not know she was good with Mr. Sinister and all of the shit that they had going on behind the scenes. And then she has this attack on her conscience now, all of a sudden, after she saw the carnage that happened at Genosha and what Sinister and company were really capable of. It changed her tune. Now she's starting to see what Magneto sees, and she sees Magneto tied up. And this is our first time seeing Magneto, understanding he's not dead, which I don't think any of us thought he was dead, but we hadn't seen him since episode 5 in Genosha. And so he's, you know, tied up in this contraption, and they've got him. And because really, Bastion knows at this point the only person strong enough to really stop me is Magneto. And if I got him, I'm straight. And that's really what that accompanied with setting off a chain of events to make people scared was what, you know, the attack on Genosha was all about. Getting Magneto and instilling the fear in people that would allow them to do the things that they ultimately wanted to do, which would turn humans into turn them into essentially human forms of Prime Sentinels, which we would later see, right? So that lady from the UN realizes that Sinister has gone too far, and this is not what I signed up for. And she frees Magneto, which we later learn at the end of the episode. But Bastion, we finally see his face, and he has this conversation with, you know, Mr. Sinister, and it was pretty dope because he's like, "You've been after him since '92, and you haven't gotten him yet. So move out, you know, move aside. Watch out. I got it now. You had your chance." So the backstory on Bastion is really quickly, he's not even a human. He was created. So he is the creation of the, oh my God, what is the thing called? I think I wrote it down. Yeah, okay. He's a cross between the Master Mold and a Nimrod. So a Nimrod is like a future advanced version of the Sentinels. So one of the ways in the regular show, Bishop is able to show the X-Men that he's not crazy, is he's able to kill one of the Nimrods. They couldn't touch the Nimrod, and it was a new advanced version of a Sentinel, and his gun was so advanced. Beast was like, yo, this is some advanced technology shit. Like, this got to be from the future. And then he was the only one that could kill the Nimrod. So that kind of helped win them over. So this Nimrod with the Master Mold combined, it went through this dimension, right? Not to get all ridiculous. It went through this dimension, and that dimension fused the atoms of those two things together, and the creation was Bastion, essentially. So he's not even a human, but he thinks he's a human because he was raised by his mom, which we would later see, you know, he turned her into a prime Sentinel as well, but that's nor here nor there. Anyway, Bastion gives us the whole speech about what happened, how he came to be, and then he releases his prime Sentinel technology, which is he's taking humans, putting them into that liquid, transforming them into prime Sentinels, and they can live normal lives, but at his beck and call, if he snaps his fingers, gives them the orders, they turn into prime Sentinels. And that's exactly what happened. After Magneto was released, he's like, all right, F it. So prime Sentinels are on the loose, and they wrecking shop. I mean, they tearing everybody ass up, and they going to work, and it's just some tough stuff. Like, the world is in peril right now, and Magneto being freed saved everybody essentially. But you also got to know, a pissed off Magneto is bad for everybody. Nobody's safe when Magneto says F it. The only person that's able to talk him off the ledge ever is Professor X. And right now, he's technically not there yet. So Magneto is pissed now because I tried to do it Charles's way. Look what it got me. Now I'm going to do it my way. I ain't trying to hear nothing from nobody. It's going down. And he essentially executes like a blackout. He takes his power to the umpteenth degree and shuts down anything that is run off of metal or any kind of electricity or any kind of energy source. Anything that's being powered by anything is done. And then, you know, I'm a nerd. One of my favorite characters is Omega Red. When I used to play the video game, first of all, one of the greatest games ever created. I've already done this on my podcast. I'm not going to do this now. Marvel versus Capcom 2. Find me a better fighting game. Find me a game with more characters. Find me a game that was better executed than Marvel versus Capcom 2. I'll wait. He was my favorite character on that game. I loved me some Omega Red. So even just seeing Omega for that split second when Magneto shut everything down, which meant he was freed. Wherever he was and being captivated, that shutdown, that blackout by Magneto freed him. I was like, yo, what up? What up, Omega? What up, Mags? That was my guy. So that was pretty dope. Even if for a split second, I got to see him. So, so that was essentially episode 8. He blacks out and the episode fades to black. So you get to episode 9. Tolerance is extinction. And this is part 2. And the first thing we see is Professor X coming back from Shi'ar. And the X-Men are upset at him. Obviously, specifically Cyclops and Jean, you abandoned us. Why didn't you come back? You know, we thought you were dead. We were going through all this without you. We could have used you. We needed you. And he tries to explain to them, I wanted you guys to grow without the burden of feeling like you needed to stay here and yada, yada, yada. So we go through that song and dance. But Storm also returns for the first time to the X-Men since episode 3, when she left after having her powers zapped in episode 2. So she returns. She's got her powers back. She brings Forge with her. Beast is happy to see him because they're both geniuses. And Game recognized Game, and Beast is like, "Oh, my old friend, you look good, and look at your leg. It looks great, and it's in even better shape than the last time I seen it." And so they're doing their whole scientist talk thing, and they're excited to see each other. So it's like the old band is getting back together of sorts. So they realize now that, hey, we got to do something, man. This Sebastian's dude is out of control, man. And you know who else is out of control? Magneto ass is out of control. This whole goddamn thing is out of control, right? So, you know, they're kind of coming up with a game plan, and they split into 2 teams, blue and gold, which are the X-Men colors. And, you know, one team is supposed to go and try to rationalize with Magneto, which there's really no rationalizing with Magneto at this point. He's like, nah, F that shit. And the other team is supposed to go and try to wrangle and corral Bastion and Mr. Sinister. Before they could even leave, Magneto approaches and is like, yo, I know y'all see what's going down. Y'all see what type of time I'm on. Y'all see the kind of energy that I'm on right now. I tried to tell y'all there was no civilized way to do this shit. Now y'all see what I'm talking about. Who's with me? Because right now, it really either you with me or you against me. Who's coming with me? And Rogue is like, bro, I was at Kenosha. I saw them take my boy Gambit from me. I seen it up close and personal. I ain't with the whole we can all be peaceful and join hands together and kumbaya. That shit went out the window when they killed my boy. I'm going with Magneto. And Sunspot was like, yo. So I think it was back in episode 7 or 8. He rolls up on a party that his mom was having for, you know, her business cohorts. And they were all appalled that she had a mutant son. And in order for her to save face, the Prime Sentinels showed up at her doorstep, and she turned her son over to the Prime Sentinels as a way to show her stockholders and all the business people that, hey, I'm with y'all. Like, we good over here, right? No need to panic. We follow the rules. So he was like, yo, my mom literally turned me over. She's supposed to be blood. She's supposed to be the person that protects me. She literally handed me over to the Prime Sentinels. I'm rolling with Magneto. So Magneto's like, yo, offer has been extended. Y'all do what y'all got to do. I'm going to do it my way. Y'all do it y'all way. Good luck. So they move with them 3. So they split up. They set up the blue and the gold team. The gold, you know, one team's going to try to talk some sense into Magneto. The other team is going to try to take down Bastion and Mr. Sinister. So that's the extent of episode 9, essentially. And shit's about to get real. Now, at the end of episode 9, so you get the battle between those, let's say that the blue team went to go fight Sinister and Bastion, and they got their hands full over there. And Jean Grey is going after Sinister because, you know, obviously they've got a history there. And he's like, I know you. You know, I know you better than you know yourself and all of that stuff, trying to get in her head. So that battle is happening. And then the other battle is Wolverine and Cyclops and all of them are trying to get to reason with Magneto. And at this point, Magneto ain't trying to reason with nobody. And Wolverine had already said, you think he's just gonna come with us because we asked nicely? Like, he's like, bro, what do you think he's gonna do at this point? Like, we're not gonna be able to go there and talk to this man. We're gonna have to take him out. And I lie to you not. This is why I said episode 5 did damage to me, because if you'll take out Gambit, nobody's safe at this point. And when Magneto took Wolverine and that anti-venom that's in his body, and he squeezed that shit with all his might, and if he wanted to, he could have killed him, obviously. But I thought he killed him. And then the episode goes off. I stopped breathing for like what felt like 30 seconds. It probably was like 7 seconds. My heart stopped. Like literally. And then I had to like tell myself, bro, breathe. I literally was like, like, that's how I reacted to that. I'm like, did they just kill Wolverine too? The good thing is I didn't have to wait a whole week to find out that he wasn't dead. You did, because you watched it and you were on that clip, you were on that cliffhanger. I did it, right? So they come back to episode 10, which is the last episode, Tolerance of Extinction. And we find out very quickly that Logan is not dead. Wolverine is not dead, but he's in pretty rough shape. Yeah, he bent him up pretty good. And now Bastion is on the loose. And the government is now trying to figure out, do we got to press the red button? So they have this thing called Magneto Protocol. And what it does is it releases this thing called Asteroid M. And this asteroid is set to just essentially come down and blow everything to smithereens. So, when you got different people trying to talk sense into the government, like, yo, don't press the button. Professor X is like, yo, I can talk to him. Let me reason with Magneto. He's like, yo, look, I'm gonna give you a little bit of time, but I'm just telling you right now, if you don't get this shit done like lickety split, we gonna have to press the button, bro. So they panic because it doesn't happen fast enough. They press the button, but they're all out engaged in battle at this point. And what you come to realize is at the core of all of this is Cable. Cable, Nathan, is at the core of all of this. And, you know, as he's come back, he's had these heart-to-hearts. You know, Cyclops is struggling with, you know, that's my son. We don't have a relationship. I did to him what my parents did to me, and I wanted to be there for him. And so he's going through all of this shit. And he finally has a heart-to-heart with Cable, you know, about his mom and you know, Jean Grey and all of that. And they kind of come to this understanding that, hey, look, man, it wasn't the most ideal situation, but I'm a ride for you. Whatever happens, I got you, bro. You here now, and we gonna try to, you know, make this thing right. So they all go out, they're fighting Bastion, and they start to get the best of him. And then he goes to Cable, and this is when you realize, because he's at the core of all of this, Bastion goes and rips Cable's arm off, beats the shit out of him with it. Fat, 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 fat. Right? And then he uses his arm to power himself up into this like advanced, crazy, you know, it developed version of himself, like this superhuman version of himself, almost like an archangel type. And now he's like almost indestructible. And it all came from the arm. He used that arm to give him whatever, you know, powers he needed. It like all of these little tentacles came out of the arm, attached itself to Bastion, and he turned into this ridiculous creation at that point. So yeah, they struggled to try to beat him. They were struggling, they were getting their asses whooped, you know, this, that, and the third. But typical, as normal, they were able to band together, find a way, and then what ultimately happens is they press the button. That asteroid M is coming. They have to then make a decision on, like, what are we gonna do? Like, if this thing comes down here, everybody's dead. So, like they typically do, the X-Men, risk their own lives to save everybody else's, and they take the bubble. Jean Grey kind of puts a force field around it, and it's around all of them as well, and it kind of blows up. And you're presuming that everybody's dead. That's kind of how they leave us. So Forge is at the end, and he's in like the mansion, and he's got like this bulletin board up with all of the X-Men and all of the heroes, if you will, who are either missing, at large, or presumed dead. And all the X-Men are essentially on that list. And Bishop walks in, and they have some words. And then they cut to, so it's Magneto, Rogue, Beast, and Professor X, who have gone to the past, BC. And then Jean Grey and Cyclops have gone to the future. And what's funny about watching a lot of the like thinking back to a lot of the X-Men episodes, we were in the 90s, so when it would be like 2010, 2022, these would be the years, and that seems so far away, right? And they had like headstones, like one episode had headstones for all of the X-Men. And it's like 2010 and 2020 and 2025, and like these crazy years you can't even imagine, because we're in like 1994, right? 1993. Now we're like, that shit is not even, like we've passed those years. It's just crazy. But I think they were like in 2055 or something. So it's still way out there. But in the past, they encounter this, what looks like a mutant, but he's like this big warrior, and he's like fighting off all of these people. And Magneto kind of shoos them away, like, all right, enough. And they ask him, because he's this big dude, he looks powerful, and he's got a mask on, and he takes the mask off, and he's like, my name is N Saboteur. Or Saboteur. And I'm like, El Saboteur, who the hell is that? But I looked at his face, and I saw that blue marking, and I was like, is that Apocalypse? And when I thought about it, if you look at Mr. Sinister's face, he's got that same shit going on his face, that same kind of look, that same Apocalypse look on his face as well. I was like, is he some kin to Apocalypse or something? I didn't know that was Apocalypse. And then you go to the future, and they encounter Nathan, which is their son, as a kid. So that'll be interesting. And then at the end, you see Apocalypse's mouth. You don't see his entire face, but I'm like, oh shit, it is Apocalypse. And that's how you end season 1. There's a lot there to that was one hell of a show, one hell of a season. one hell of a bang. And you know what's scary for me is, as a nerd, as a geek, I'm scared that season 2 isn't going to live up to the hype. And they already fired one of the guys that was, before it even released, that was really instrumental in like the first 7 episodes. They fired him. I don't know what happened, what kind of creative differences they had, but he's no longer there. I'm just like, please don't F this up. There's so much you can do with this. There's so many different directions you can go. Please don't mess this up. That is like, it's the gift and the curse of doing something so well like this. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section. I don't want to hold you guys here any longer than I need to. 16 Double Dot. Been a member for 33 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, this X-Men show was what we should have gotten instead of the live action movies we got in the late 90s. X-Men was always about team first, not just Wolverine. That's what the live action is. And there's people that wanted to turn this into live action. I don't really know if I want this to turn into live action. I don't know if I want this in a live action form. Like, I'm not a, like, okay, so I don't mind live action, but this is my shit right here. This is my arena right here, right? At its core, this is what I grew up on. This is what I want. Now, I'll watch live action, but I prefer this right here. Give me this all day over live action. Too many people get involved. Too many different factors are at work when you involve real actors and writers and all these people that think they know what we want to see. I would rather it stay right here at its core with the people that are geeky and nerdy like us, that know how this is supposed to go, or at least have some sort of inkling. Leave it there where it belongs. That's personally how I, and then you get really nitpicky when you do live action. Oh, he wouldn't have done this, or he doesn't even look like this person. Like, I like it where it is, right? But that's just me. 16 Double Dot, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I understand that Wolverine is a cash cow, but that's why you do solo movies for him. That's what the live action missed. Again, this is what happens when you involve the human element, is that you allow this to happen. So I really appreciate this project, because like you said, this was more about the X-Men. This wasn't about one individual. You know, they could have went off on a Cyclops Jean Grey tangent. They didn't. Everybody got some here. You know, everybody got a little bit of the, you know, the storyline. Spread it out too amongst others. Like I said, they could have really extended this out another 5 to 7 episodes if they wanted to. We could have got more Morph in some of his backstory. Like, in the regular show, Morph, you know, is essentially left for dead by, you know, Cyclops, because he had to choose between saving Morph or the rest of the X-Men. And so if they didn't leave when they left, everybody was going to die. So they left Morph, and Sinister found him and kind of, you know, possessed his mind and tried to talk him into, hey, they left you for dead and they don't care about you. And so he turned him against the rest of the X-Men. That happened, and they could have, you know, had, you know, give us a little bit of backstory there with Sinister and kind of weave that in if they wanted to, right? But they didn't. But everybody got a little piece of the pie. I like that. 16 Double Dot, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, can't wait for next season of X-Men. You and me both. Right? You and me both. The hardest part for me is going to be waiting while everybody's like, oh my God, this is so good. Or if people are like, yo, this is whack. I'm gonna have to just sit there and take that, because I can't watch week by week. I gotta have the ability to binge, turn it on, turn it off when I want to. I can't go through the roller coaster of emotions. I can't now. A lot of you were telling me, "Oh my God!" Like after episode 5, a lot of people came to me like, "You're not gonna believe what happened." This, that, and the third. I still didn't know. I did a really good job of staying away, so I didn't know that Gambit died. I just knew something really catastrophic happened. And then after 9, I know a lot of people were like, "Yo, bro, I don't know if I can do this shit." You know, I would have been that person had I watched when it first came out and then had to wait another week for the last episode. I would have been that person. Dr. B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "Love season 1. Loved it. That exceeded my expectations. I know so many people loved Echo, and it was a good show, don't get me wrong. But I got to Echo probably just, like I always tell you, I like to let, the whole season be available before I watch something. I'm not sure if Echo was just released and all the episodes were there, or if they did it on a weekly basis. Whatever the case may be, people built up Echo into this, epic, like, oh my God, this thing was so good. And it was good, don't get me wrong. But my expectations were through the roof because of how many people told me it was so good. And when I got there, I was a little disappointed. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was still really good, don't get me wrong. And I can't wait for season 2 of Echo if they bring it back. But I just was a little disappointed because my expectations were through the roof because of what everybody told me. My expectations were through the roof for this X-Men 97 because of what every single person that I knew as a kid was talking about this, and they were gushing and raving about it. And so my expectations were through the roof. My wife was like, "Yo, I've never seen you this excited to watch something." And I'm like, I just hope it lives up to my expectation and my standards. This shit exceeded it. And I could never have imagined that would have taken place with the amount of hype that this thing was given by the people who had watched it before me. This was outstanding. Love that they stayed true to the comics. If the villain stays as it was in the comics, season 2 is about to be epic. Hashtag Onslaught. I remember I had the dopest Onslaught card. And man, he was wicked. Onslaught was wicked. One of those, similar to what Thanos has become. Like, Onslaught is destruction and death. So if he's a part of season 2, we might be losing more than just Gambit, right? Derek B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "I rewatched 92 through 96, but you can recap off the dome. Not everything. Certain episodes stick out more than others. There's certain episodes I can talk your head off about because I remember them like they were yesterday. There were some episodes, because it was in syndication, I watched more than others. So I have a better sense of, certain episodes because I've watched them 4, 5, 6 times, whereas certain episodes, I've only watched them once or twice. But a lot of that stuff is etched in the memory bank. Yeah. I mean, when I tell you I became a really big comic fan, like, not reading the comics. I wish I would have gotten into reading the comics, because I think that's a gift and a curse, reading the comics, because if you read the comics, then you are a purist in the truest sense. And so everything has to fit the comic or else you're going to feel cheated. I don't have the weight of that attached to me. The stigma of, oh, this doesn't match the comic doesn't burden me. I do oftentimes revert back to the regular X-Men series, and I'm like, well, that doesn't necessarily match up. But obviously when you have different writers, the storylines can change. So I don't really hold them like steadfast to this has to line up. But for the most part, a lot of the storylines, a lot of the backstories, a lot of those things jive. A lot of those things lined up, which is why I said they did a phenomenal job. A lot of that is etched in my memory bank. No, yes. Garage Gym Life, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Storm has claustrophobia because of getting trapped under some debris when she was a little girl in an accident that killed her parents. Okay. I didn't know that. So that's new information. You learn something new every day. So I know she was claustrophobic. Didn't know exactly why. But that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense now why she is claustrophobic, because I know they made reference to it in the show a bunch of times, and it may have been in an episode and I just didn't remember that particular aspect, but I just remember them reference it in the show a bunch of times about how, claustrophobic she is, doesn't like confined in tight spaces. So that's good to know. Garage Gym Life. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, this is one of my favorite non-Washington centric podcast episodes you've done. Let's see more comic book related nerd content, Lou. I try not to, like, if I had another channel for this, then I would do more of this. I don't want to overtake my channel with this. Like, I try to do this when it is pertinent, but I don't want to turn off the core base, if you will. You understand what I'm saying? Like, people that come here for Washington content or football content in general. They see too much of this and they get turned off. It's one of the reasons why I had to take my card channel and separate it from my YouTube channel, my LouieTeeNetwork channel, because if I'm used to seeing a notification show up and it's football related, and all of a sudden you got all these card videos showing up, I'm going to unsubscribe from your channel. I didn't sign up for this. So, when it's pertinent, yeah, you'll get this kind of content from me, but it won't be like on a regular basis. But this warranted its own episode, right? I mean, this series was epic. It's like the best thing I've ever watched. Seriously. So, video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, Lou, big favorite of mine throughout the series was Morph with the cameos. Got Juggernaut, Magic, Hulk, Angel, Blob, Psylocke, plus others. Yeah, when he turned into Psylocke, when he was fighting that guy from the FOH, that was pretty dope, right? Psylocke was another one of my favorites on the game. I had a mean combo. I think my combo got as high as like 150 something hits, bro, between Cyclops, Omega Red, and I think Psylocke with her beam. Bro, if I hit you with all of that, it was over with. You were done. Especially if I caught your whole. I once got to like 500 or 600 hits because I caught a whole crew out there and blessed all of them at once. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, that you gotta love, more for that, because you can get anything at any time, right? 16 Devil Dot. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, best dialogue, 1 Magneto, 2 Nightcrawler. Magneto killed it. It killed it in this with his dialogue. Magneto is just so cool, man. Like, man of few words, when he speaks though, is profound. You know what I'm saying? Like, he don't shortchange you with the impact of his words. Like I told you, he had the quote, "The brave are always the first to go, to die." As they're flying off on the, on the Blackbird. Yeah, and he had said that in the show as well. The brave are always the first to die. Like, Magneto is a beast, man. Nightcrawler, I've always had an affinity for Nightcrawler. Just the accent, and yeah, him being a priest. There's kind of this like crazy like mix there because he's a priest too. So yeah, Nightcrawler was pretty dope. The eulogy was dope too that he gave for Gambit. Dandrix, been a member for 25 months. Slow clap commences. Can't lurk on this one. Hit the thumbs up. I appreciate that. And the fact that we have more likes than concurrent viewers right now is a testament to y'all hitting the like button. I really appreciate y'all for that. DJ23, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I laughed when Rogue threw Cap's shield because she knew, because I knew he was pissed having to find it. She threw the hell out. She launched that joint into like space, bro. She was so hot at him. Like, well, if you ain't gonna help me, you won't be needing this. And she threw that bitch like a frisbee. Just ha! And Captain America was looking like, you dirty son of a bitch. He was mad as hell. He was hot. It's gonna come back. I think it's supposed to come back to him, but he might be waiting a while for that one. Dr. B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Onslaught versus X-Men, Avengers, and Fantastic Four. That's why Spider-Man and Hulk cameos. X-Men will come from that alternate universe that Jean, Cyclops, etc. Yeah, man, you got to go all the way back though into the comics. Shout out to my guy Derek B. He put me on to this one channel where she kind of explains a lot of stuff, like the origins of comics and where a lot of this stuff comes from. And I got through, I think, the first episode, most of the first episode, and it's pretty good stuff actually. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, she's really good too. She knows her stuff. But yeah, it's the things that they can do with what they've done and where they've left this is crazy, right? Garage Gym Life, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Garage Gym Life writes, makes sense. I keep stuff exercise related on my channel for the same reason, even though I love comic book movies, Star Wars, Washington football, etc. Exactly. You like, you know, your core audience comes for what they signed up for. And, you know, if you interject too much of the other stuff, they lose interest. So I'm glad you understand, but I would love to do more of this. And if it's warranted, I will. You know what I mean? That's why I have my podcast, because I can talk about whatever the hell I want on my podcast. Like some people show up and they're looking for football content. Well, you don't know what you're going to get on my podcast. That's the beauty of my podcast. I talk about anything and everything on my podcast. Dandrix, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Dandrick writes, please do not make me let you down. Magneto episode 2, fire. Like, that was his way of essentially saying, like, if you do what you said you're gonna do, and this turns out the way that it's supposed to, then we Gucci. We're fine. But I'm just telling you, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, please don't make me act in the manner that I know is probably the way that I should act, but I'm trying to do this out of respect for my guy. Please don't make me turn ugly, though. It's up to you to decide how this is going to go, right? He's such a badass. Red Wings 01. Also, that last episode was a lot of him and Charles, like, you know, going into their, you know, bag back in the day, and them, they were both kind of out of it mentally at that point, and you know, trying to will each other to survive and to not give in, and you know, that sort of thing too. Red Wing 01, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I agree with you that it's better animated. There are a lot of things that work better in animation or comics that don't translate in live action. Exactly. I would rather leave it where it is. To me, it is great right where it is. This is the space it belongs in. And I get it. A lot of people love live action and you get a different audience and crowd involved when you go live action as well. So I understand that. But if you're speaking to the core base, if you're speaking to people like yourself and me and others that enjoyed this series, just leave it here. I don't need live action. Just pour your energy into this, and I'm good with this right here, right where it is. I just hope they understand that. They get the memo and they don't get blinded by, you know, the opportunity to cash in on a live action version. Just leave it here. This is where it's at its best. But whatever they do, it's whatever, right? I mean, it is what it is. But I'm just hoping that that's ultimately what they decide to do. Clearly, we're going to get a season 2, right? Clearly, that's going to happen. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, not sure what Double Dot meant by live action missing Wolverine solo films because there's 3 of them. Sure, X-Men Origins was mid at best, but the Wolverine was good. Logan was a masterpiece. I think he was just saying, kind of giving him his own platform and kind of having him break away from the group and get his own movies. That was cool, but I think he felt like in a lot of the actual movies, they focused in a lot on him as a character. I think is what he's trying to say. And that led to him getting his own, spinoff of movies by himself. And he was saying, if you're going to do a movie with the X-Men, then do it about the entire group and don't spend as much time worried about Wolverine. I think that's what he was trying to say. And he's like, if you're going to do that, just do that with his movies. I think it's what he was trying to say. I mean, you may not agree with that assessment, but I think that's what he was trying to say. I don't like speaking for people, but I think that's what he was trying to get at. Dandrix, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, FYI, writer submitted for season 2 before he got fired. You're still going to binge? Should watch weekly and have bonus pod after each episode, man. I don't know if my heart can take it, bro. I don't know if I'm mentally set up and wired to watch week by week. I can tell you right now, 5 and 9 would have took me out. 5 and 9 would have took me out. Bless all of you who watched week by week by week and went and rode the roller coaster and were able to function with how they left you on those cliffhangers. My cliffhanger lasted for all of 2 minutes, before I was like, all right, I got to watch the next one. I mean, that's a great idea in theory. If I could withstand that, maybe that's something I might do. We'll see. I can't guarantee you that I would be able to do that, though. The way that they hit me this season, I'm pretty sure that's not the route that I probably need to take. Just from my heart purposes, right? Just for longevity and preservation of life for me, right? Anyway. Garage Gym Life, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, the MCU was at its best by fielding testing ideas in the Avengers cartoons. This may be a similar situation. Maybe. If it is, I want more of it. More tests, please. More, you remember the Ovaltine commercials? More Ovaltine, please. More testing, please. Give me more. If this is what those tests look like, give me more. More, I say. Because this is as good as it gets right here, man. This is as good of a product as I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not a prisoner of the moment here. I watched a lot of X-Men, comics and things, animation and things of that nature. I've never seen anything put together in this manner before. This well done. Paying homage to the past by while still forging a new path and making it all feel like one. Like it didn't feel segmented or disjointed. I never felt like, what are they doing here? It all, even episode 4, which was kind of like thrown in there, it fit with how, if you watch the original show, it fit how they did things. And it was them, hey, let's throw Mojo in here. Why not? Who doesn't love Mojo? Who doesn't love Mojo? He's a character all to himself. Anyway, I digress. Oh my God, look at the time. I had a prior engagement, and man, I feel so bad. Hopefully I can still get over there in time. But this was a lot of fun. And I look forward to chopping it up with you guys again about this. And, we can chop it up about this on the podcast anytime if you want to bring it up. We'll see what happens with with season 2. I imagine we're going to wait a while for season 2. I can't imagine this will be like Jurassic Park, where, 3 months from now we get in season 2 of this. I imagine we're going to be waiting at least a year, possibly more, for season 2, but we'll see, man. If it's anything like this, it'll be well worth the wait. I'll just say that. Rest in peace to Gambit. Remy was a soldier, man. I'm holding out hope that he's not dead, but Remy feels pretty dead. Remy LeBeau feels pretty dead to me. So, damn, that was a great season. Well done. Well done. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this bonus podcast episode talking about X-Men 97 and nerding out over what was one of the best pieces of Marvel content these eyes have ever seen. The best. Hopefully we'll get to do this again. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Thank you for making this such a fun experience. And I can't wait till we do this again. You guys have a good one. Take care. X-Men 97. If you haven't, you shouldn't be watching this, first of all, if you haven't. If you plan on. But if you've watched it and you're watching this on the playback, wow. That's all I got to say. Wow. Job well done. See you guys next time.